Hello there, and welcome to Sweet Child of Time. I'm Steve Barnes, your host. I'm here with Lindsay Dunn from one of my stories. Ahoy there, Lindsay.
Ahoy!
Hey, we're doing Dark today. We're doing episode 2, season 1, episode called Lies. And you've done the recap for this, Lindsay. Thank you very much. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm a little tired, but I'm gonna get into this episode as soon as we start. I'm confident.
Yes, we have started, so here we go.
We're here. We're doing it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat too. We're recording late at night, but that's just how we do it. We got to do stuff during the day. We got lots of busy. We got podcast producers and editors and all these fan letters rolling in. So we're very busy all day long. Lindsay, do you want to start us out?
Yeah, absolutely. I will transition into all of those commercials and all that wonderful promotion into the actual recap. So we are moving into episode 2, titled Lies. It's a good title. We have secrets. We have secrets. Now we have lies.
Yep.
So at the beginning of this episode, we see the Winden power plant looming over the town, and the crows are flying by, and it's very moody. Mm-hmm. And a caption lets us know that it's been 9 hours since Mikkel disappeared.
Yes.
The show is really good at giving you these occasional timestamps. Not all the time. Some movies really inundate you with that. Every time they change, they're like Berlin, Paris, but this show does make sporadic use of that, and it's a useful thing to let you know kind of where you are.
I'm glad they did.
Mm-hmm. So we have this mysterious man walking out of the Winden caves holding a suitcase. Mm-hmm. And he looks on at a search party that's happening in the woods. And we're assuming they're looking for Mikkel.
Right.
And I guess still Eric too. But
sure,
we do see that there are police, and that does make me think, perhaps this elaborate of a search did not happen for Eric Obendorf, which is why his parents were so upset.
Huh.
Right? They were saying the police were not doing much. So it's like, I wonder if Ulrich had anything to do with this.
Yeah, when the cops kid goes missing, it's a different story. I would like to think that they did the same thing for Eric, but it's been like 2 weeks, so they've already done all that trampling around in the woods, so now they're on to like other stuff. I would like to think that, but that's a really good point.
That's fair. But this man stoops down and picks up the carcass of a dead bird, which, I don't know. I'm like, what's that about?
Yeah,
doesn't seem healthy to pick up dead animals.
I'm assuming by a power plant, some toxic chemicals. But I mean, power plants are supposed to be safe, in their vicinity. Doesn't look like it to me. Maybe he's going to take it to the lab and examine it. That's what I was thinking. Take some samples from it, some DNA samples. I also thought it was really weird how he was just all out there, standing on that hilltop, fully visible to anybody who might want to look up at him. I thought that was interesting, how he wasn't hiding. He was just there with his big old suitcase.
Well, from that vantage point, we don't know what the people saw. Maybe we saw him from the ground. I don't remember, but we saw him come out of the cave. But as far as he was looking down at the search party. Right. And he was wearing his raincoat, remember, so his hood was up. But we get a very up-and-close, personal look at his face.
Oh, yeah. I saw that face. Reminds me of somebody from 1899, except a little younger version of such. But I was just thinking, since he had a clear view of them searching the field, they must have a clear view of him up there in his creepy, hooded black clothing, and they'd be like, hey, who's that guy? I mean, I would think that would arouse suspicion. And when our next scene comes and like we see Jonas Jonas like pseudo wakes up from a nightmare first. Yeah. I was wondering if this was a dream that maybe Jonas was having. But it seemed to me that's not the case. It seemed to me that guy came out of the cave with his suitcase and looked at them and found the bird. It seems to me that that's reality.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing I got out of this was that he was sort of separate from what's going on in the town.
Sure.
The town is
Okay.
all looking, but he's sort of coming out almost like a bystander and just saying, look at those people over there. Nothing to do with me. So
Right.
you can tell he's
Okay.
kind of an outsider, I think is fair to say.
Well, we should tell him that everything is connected, right?
From here, Jonas, like you said, wakes up from another nightmare. We can assume we don't see what he's thinking about. But he hears this piercing, ringing tone and goes to the mirror and holds his ear, and there's black goo coming out of his ear. And when he turns around, he sees his father. Again, the same kind of look that Michael Conwald had at the end of episode 1.
Which I guess is how Jonas always sees him, covered in that black gook paint.
Yeah.
That Darkways production black stuff. They love that black stuff, don't they? It reminded me of Virginia's hand when he was trying to get it off his hands. When Jonas was dreaming and he was doing the little rubby thing. I was like, oh, looks like Virginia to me.
Right. So he kind of wakes up again. So
That's right. That was the black stuff
woken
was
up
all a dream,
twice. Yeah. And then this whole thing is sort of, there's so much that's 1899 adjacent, but like the theme of wake up, Jonas is waking up
Right.
over and over again. He wakes up, he has black goop, wakes up again, does not have black goop.
Yep.
But yeah. So, moving on.
Yeah, I think this is pretty. I don't think there's much in here to dissect. I mean, I guess there is, but I don't have any notes for it, so I'm ready to move on.
Yeah. So we're now at the police station, and Charlotte is listening to the results of the autopsy of the dead boy who was found by her and Ulrich. And there's a lot of details in here. So 10 to 12 years old. He died 16 hours before the body was found.
Right. Weird.
And in addition, it turns out that the eyes were burned or melted, which caused that black material to form around the eyes, look like a mask almost. And the boy's eardrums and canal are destroyed.
Yes.
And Charlotte's trying to figure out what could cause something like that. And the forensic person says that it could be a loud noise, pressure, or centrifugal force. And that this is when we learn about the boys, what octoconia are.
Yeah, I like this.
Octoconia.
Yep.
That they have these fibers or grains inside your ear that tell you if you're upside down or right side up.
Right.
And if these are damaged, you can't tell where you are. And the boys' otoconia are all askew and in the wrong place. And one of the things that came to mind for me immediately, some of these clues also make me think about Eric.
Yes,
because
exactly.
the eyes are burned.
Yep.
And, then we saw the machine at the end closing over his eyes. I don't remember if they did anything with his ears, but then there's the connection with Jonas with his ears.
Right.
And that just this concept that it's almost like, it sounds like what this boy experienced before death was that it was like he didn't know where he was.
Right. And I made the same connection too. Like I made that connection in the first episode when I saw his burnt up eyes, and they ended the episode with the clamp going across Eric's eyes there too. I was thinking the exact same thing. This guy got chaired just like Eric did. And I assumed that the thing makes a weird noise because it's around his eyes. So obviously it's going to be around his ears too. So I suppose there's some kind of pulsing or something I don't want to experience. I don't want to get in that weird room. So
Yeah, none of us want to get into that weird room.
there's some weirdos I think that would be vying for that. But I didn't make the connection with the ears though until you just told me. So thank you for that.
Well, I just came up with that connection as I was talking, so I didn't.
Yeah.
I was like, let's talk about ears. We were just talking about ears.
That's exactly why we do this podcast. I had something they're going to go on later on about how he was dressed in 1980s clothes and he had a 1980s cassette tape with him. So I'm thinking Mads disappeared in the 80s. I think it's logical thinking, right? That Mads disappeared in the 80s and like Ulrich found him and he's like, oh, it's not Mikkel. But that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, is it Mads? But it can't be because Ulrich would know. He would say, oh, look, it's my brother. Those are my brother's shoes. That's my brother's Walkman. So obviously it's not Mads. But that's the first thing I thought. And I think the show is kind of leading me to think that. And Heather definitely thought that. She told me to say on the podcast that she thinks the boy is Mads straight up. She's like, that's Mads. And I was like, it's leading us to believe that, but I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, I think Ulrich would recognize him if that was the case.
Well, I feel like I really can't say anything here.
Because I'm the sweet child, right?
You're the sweet child. But it does, we're going to get to it later, I think, some more clues about Mads. But like one of the things that you logically would think that was impossible is that it says that the boy died 16 hours before the body was found. So if that's the case, and we know that Mads has been missing since 1986, then it can't be Mads, right?
Right.
But in Ulrich, thinking about Ulrich, he's been sort of out to lunch for a while. I mean, he keeps trying to deny the connections. So I think there's a possibility that even if the evidence were pointing that it was Mads, he would find a way to not believe that because he doesn't want to believe it's connected. Or has not been willing to.
Right.
He hasn't been willing to admit that up until this point.
Okay. Well, I guess it's just a moot point anyway. I'm just speculating now. And I know that like he was looking at that necklace really closely. And I think if he recognized that necklace, the red string with the penny, he would be like, oh, yeah, I recognize this necklace. But he never said that. He just kind of looked at it blankly.
Right. But if he did, wouldn't there be a lot of questions?
Yeah.
There'd be a lot of questions if he was to say, this is Mads. That would be like really difficult for anybody.
You're speculating that he's holding it close to the vest there.
No, I'm saying when people see things, they don't always want to believe them. If things defy logic, they find ways to not believe them.
Absolutely.
What do they call that? Like cognitive dissonance?
Oh, yeah. You're talking Westworld talk now. Yes.
Yeah. Two ideas that don't seem like they could make sense together have a possibility of making sense. Your mind refuses the evidence that would allow you to believe that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm sorry. I belabored that point a lot. Let's move on.
Steve, you did talk to me about like not getting bogged down in those details. Okay.
I can talk, but I can't listen.
But my Otoconia are starting to wave around, so I think we should move on to the next point.
Sounds good.
So the community search party is going on, as we said, and Ulrich is doing his own private investigation in the caves.
That's right.
And discovers a metal door inside the cavern that has that universal symbol for radiation on it. And I will say, it did surprise me. The thing that struck me about this scene, I only used a couple sentences, but the scene itself is a little longer because our people don't always talk. There's a lot that they just do, right?
Yes.
And so he's searching in the caves and, he didn't really takes the time to figure out some safety for himself. He's just by himself with no.
I was thinking he needed a buddy. He needed Charlotte with him.
Yeah, he could have brought Charlotte, but he didn't have any equipment, and he falls several times because he's very emotional though. So
can't blame him.
Yeah.
And the door kind of makes sense to me because if it's a power plant nearby, they're going to need to have underground stuff for their radiation core and stuff like that. So it kind of makes sense to me that it butts up against these natural caves. But I would think that the power plant would welcome someone. There's a missing child. Yes, we'd love to help. That'd be great publicity for us. But they're not quite so open arms there, are they?
Well, we're going to divert for the moment to our teenagers. And we have a scene between Franziska and Magnus. And Magnus is just kind of hanging out in the woods as if he's waiting for Franziska. So
seems like
not as if. I mean, he is waiting for her. And because she tries to move around him and he blocks her path and kind of pushes her up against the tree and doing his Magnus bully thing.
Yeah.
It worked with Mikkel. Maybe it'll work with Franziska.
Nah, man, she's unfazed. She doesn't even flinch.
Yeah. But, he's upset. He's upset about this whole Mikkel situation, so he's just sort of wondering why she was in the woods, which, again, this doesn't really make sense. Like, the whole idea is Mikkel's missing, everybody's broken up about it. Why would he... I guess it's because Franziska's the outsider. He and Bartosz and Jonas and Marta, they all had this plan. They were going to go to the caves, and Franziska wasn't part of it, so... maybe she has something to do with it, which is kind of bizarre. But when you're grieving, you're not logical, right?
Right. And plus, he kind of maybe likes her a little bit, too. And so there's a little bit of that mixed in there with his turmoil. So maybe, I don't know, maybe in his mind, he was hoping that she would have an answer and then maybe they would talk or something. But it didn't go that way.
Mm-hmm. But, Franziska, we saw before, I feel like she has sort of a sassy attitude a little bit, right?
Sure.
Like in the first episode, and she's not, if he tries to downgrade her or whatever, be sarcastic, she just gives it right back.
Yeah.
But in this case, she just says, I'm really sorry that Mikkel's gone missing. And it really kind of takes him back.
Yes.
A little bit. Like, he's taken aback by her response that he didn't expect such a sincere response from her, perhaps. But this moment I told you I like the character of Magnus. And I think this is one of the moments in this episode, like this episode in general, all the times we see Magnus are what get me. Because he's so emotional about everything, but he's just such a wounded animal in all of his scenes, like especially in this episode.
I did appreciate how raw he was, and I appreciated Francesca for being as understanding as she was. Like, I think she didn't flinch or didn't get upset because she knew exactly why he was upset, and she's feeling for him, and it made me like her character a little bit more.
Right. We did have a look at this Vupak's jacket.
Oh,
which
the jacket. I love it.
It's so sad that it's interesting because every once in a while I will look at their website to see if they brought that bomber jacket back. But nope, it's just hoodies and t-shirts now. The jacket has not been made, but Vupax was very proud of that and had a lot of pictures when that show came out of Moritz. Is it Moritz Jan's the character? Anyway, he's wearing the jacket and looks really good in it. So
yeah, what better advertising is that? Except for now, we're talking about Vupex as well. When's our Vupex check coming in, baby?
Yeah.
Send us some jackets.
We're talking about you. Sponsor this podcast. All right, so switching over now to Peter Doppler, who, man, this guy is, he's so sad all the time, right? I mean, he calls Charlotte up before and was like, I got to tell you something. And she's like, I'm too busy to listen to you right now. And then he's sitting in the car listening to the news report and just sobbing.
Yeah. He's a big question mark right now. I haven't seen everything I've seen by him. I'm suspicious of this fella. I think it's by design. I think all of us are looking at this guy right now, like with our raised eyebrows, like, what do you know about these two? Who, and we know who his daughter is. His daughter is Franziska, right?
Right.
Yeah. And then his wife, of course, is Charlotte. She's working on the case. I don't really have any kind of speculation. So far, all I know, because I honestly don't remember where this goes with Peter. All I know is that he was quasi, maybe Jonah's therapist by proxy of some sort.
Right.
And he seemed like he was pretty cool in that scene, with the exception. I mean, at first he was cool anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's my number one suspect right now. I mean, him and Ulrich's dad. Yeah.
Yeah, especially since he says, "There's something I have to tell you, Charlotte." And
right.
It's like, and then she just.
Maybe he always does that.
If he could have, I guess he could have said, "I have something to tell you about Eric," or
right.
what, she's just like, "I don't have time for you right now." So yeah, it's interesting.
These writers keeping it close to the vest, keeping us guessing already.
Yeah. So shortly after, we see Trant Nielsen, who is Jana's husband, Ulrich's dad, putting a sweater in the washing machine with blood on the sleeves. Okay, now that is very suspicious.
Yeah, I think him and Peter are working together. I don't know.
And Jana we can hear she's leaving another message for Ulrich at work. Mm-hmm. And she's worried about him and wanting to say how sorry she is about Mikkel. What can they do?
How she must feel losing a son and now losing a grandson, like in the same situation. Like,
right.
She's got to be going insane, and her husband's just a stiff weirdo.
Yeah, and she kind of comes in and says, "Well, shouldn't we do something? Can we, should we talk? Go see them, go visit them, bring a meal. What is it? People bring a meal or something?"
Yeah.
And Tron's just like, "The police are working on it." And she asks him where he was last night, and he tells her he was trimming the bushes
at night.
And that the car, but she said the car wasn't there. Well, I was at the gas station getting cored. And he's a horrible liar.
Yeah, not good lies.
But later we see him join the search party. This is later in the episode, but he does go and he's helping with that. And he has this journal in his coat pocket, which I thought was interesting. I hadn't noticed that before, that they kind of make a point of pulling back, and he pulls it out of his coat and puts it back in.
Right.
Like, notice this journal.
Yes. That's all I could do was just notice that he did that. I looked for writing. I looked for anything. There was nothing to see there. So he... But he did mention to his wife that he was going to join the search party during their little brief conversation. That was like the only thing that I got from him that was a kernel of positivity, was that he was going to go out there and join the search party. But everything else was just, he was hiding the sweater from his wife, obviously. He's hiding what he's doing from his wife at night. Seems sketchy.
Kind of reminds me of Ulrich a little bit. That there's a different tone to it, but the whole thing is you're doing things and not talking to your wife, and kind of, you're hiding things because, he certainly didn't show her the bloody sleeve or...
Nope.
And so when we now move back to Ulrich Nielsen's house, where Marta and Katerina are discussing Mads' disappearance.
Right.
And that when Mads disappeared, Ulrich was 15 and Mads was 12. So there's just a little talk where they're like, she's trying to understand. Marta, I guess she's trying to understand, she's trying to get comfort for the fact that maybe I understand better now Dad's situation with his brother, Yeah, it was a very simple scene. But the other thing to note is that Bartosz is trying to call Marta, and she is not wanting to talk to him at all.
Yeah, maybe she didn't like his behavior that night, or maybe she's just, absorbed in her grief.
Yeah. I
like the moment between the mother and the daughter here. I thought it was, it was a simple moment, but it was, good building that, that they have a relationship. But I wanted to say too that she was saying that she was Marta is she. I gotta specify when I say she, right? Marta was telling her mom, Mikkel was really worried about Eric that night, which I think is cool, that worried about him and how if he was lost, he wanted to be found. And that comes into fruition the very next day.
Yeah, so Marta's remembering how her brother was feeling when he disappeared.
Yeah. That's exactly what I would do, play out the whole night in my mind to try to get any kind of sense of what's up.
Going over it any more and more. Yeah. So we find some more facts about the dead boy's body that I think are interesting, that there was red soil on the clothes, but no red soil where the body was found. So the body was moved after the death.
Right.
They all recognize the clothing, shoes, and Sony Walkman were from the 80s. This is Charlotte talking to her coworkers, I believe.
She says something weird. She says, like, he was dressed. She didn't say, like, he was dressed as if he was in the 80s. She said someone dressed him as if he was in the 80s.
Okay, yeah.
I thought that was a really weird word choice on her part. I didn't know if I was supposed to notice that or not, but it was weird.
Yeah, well, that would make sense if he isn't really from the 80s, that somebody would dress, maybe be like, okay, I'm trying to throw the people off, so I'm going to dress them in, like serial killers sometimes do stuff to their victims, like they'll be, they put them to bed and so it just, I mean, I've watched a lot of Law and Order, okay?
That's why I was wondering, like, I mean, I would see somebody dressed, with Jordans on and that kind of clothing, and I would think to myself, oh, those are like 80s style clothes, but I wouldn't think to myself, somebody dressed that person in 80s clothes. There's a big difference, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So the boy has what's called a 1 pfennig coin around his neck, hanging on a red cord, and the coin is a 1986 vintage.
Cool.
The tape on the Walkman is playing the same song that Eric heard in the creepy blue room. Now, I think we sort of alluded to that in the first episode, but it was nice that they confirmed that.
Yes.
So they, that's on the tape, is that same song, which is like Ingward woo. Yeah. So the yellow sweatshirt was really interesting that the boy was wearing, which reads Atama Energy Nindanka, which means nuclear energy, no thanks.
I would not have caught that if not for you. Thank you.
Yeah, I looked this up back when I did the written recap, because I was like, there were so many fun pop culture things in the show to kind of catch, like the things people are wearing, or sometimes posters on the wall.
Sure.
And yeah, so it's a play on the Smiling Sun slogan from the 1970s that was used to protest nuclear energy as an energy source. And the police don't want to share all these details because they fear it will add to the panic already. Probably a good call.
Right.
But it's this sweatshirt was really interesting because it kind of shows, I would think, the person wearing this. Now, I don't know a lot about German culture, but maybe it was really popular at this time to be protesting nuclear energy, but they live in a town that is basically running because of nuclear energy. So whoever was wearing this shirt was, sort of environmentally, minded, you might say. Either that or it was just, this is what the cool kids do. They
I was thinking snarky
or
irony or something like that. Like, the same way I'd wear like a Carly Rae Jepsen t-shirt, just being silly. Like, I don't like Carly Rae Jepsen, but check out my shirt. It could be like one of those deals. Like, yeah, our town runs on nuclear energy. No thanks. Like, just as an ironic statement. But I mean, I'm glad you translated that for me. I don't know if I would have picked up on that at all.
So while this is going on, Ulrich just bursts into the room very unprofessionally. Yes. And tells Charlotte about the mysterious door. he found in the caves. Now, this is what I just think this is what you do not do in the middle of a whatever you call it, a report
presentation
to the staff, and especially if you're trying not to add to anybody's panic. You know, Ulrich just bursts in the room and says he found this door. And so Charlotte very wisely moves outside, and they're going to try to get a search warrant to look at the power plant because Alexander will not allow them to search without putting up a fight. And Ulrich then also reveals that Mads disappeared in the same place that Mikkel did so many years ago. So he is now, as we've already kind of said, starting to realize there may be a connection after all.
Which is why I immediately thought, okay, well, that kid they found is not Mads, because Ulrich is so in the game here and he's making these connections. I would think that if that kid was Mads, that Ulrich would suspect that or recognize that or something, especially because he's been missing since '86. Mm-hmm. So if he died in '86 and his body was found in 2019, it wouldn't be as pristine as we just saw it, but it would still be a child's body. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Or
wouldn't he recognize the sweatshirt if that was his brother's sweatshirt too?
I think he would, except for when Charlotte gave her presentation. I got to stress the word choice that she gave was weird. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe it wasn't Mads' clothes. Mm-hmm. Hello, and we are back to Sweet Child of Time. Still recapping Dark Episode 2. And Lindsay, I think we're moving back to the power plant now. Is that correct?
Right. Ulrich and Charlotte were talking about the fact that Alexander probably won't let them search without a search warrant.
Right.
And we get our first look at Alexander Tiedemann in this episode that tells Mr. Obendorf, Eric's dad, that we must get rid of them tonight.
Yeah, them. That it's awfully ominous. He doesn't say what it is. He just says them. Is it human? Is it animal? Is it donations to the Salvation Army? What is it? Mm-hmm.
I will say this episode overall I think is interesting. This episode is more than maybe any other episode. Like, leans into the murder mystery or the mystery aspect, right? We've got Peter Doppler going, I must tell you something, Charlotte, and crying in his car. And we've got Mr. Tiedemann. We must get rid of them tonight. These are like things you could put on and people would be like, oh my gosh, he's guilty. He's guilty. He's guilty.
Yep.
So they're really doing a good job sort of spreading out the suspicion. And then the mysterious stranger that comes out of the cave. And
exactly, yeah.
Is like hanging out with dead birds. Maybe he likes to hang out with dead boys too.
Yikes. He's a dead man. Tiedemann, he's much different in this episode than he was last episode. Last episode, I guess we saw him a little more vulnerable. He just had a back rub or whatever, and so he was more relaxed. He looked ready to go to the board meeting and crack some heads in this episode. And what did he say? Something like, he never told us the difference between successful and unsuccessful people. He just said, do you know the difference between successful and unsuccessful people? Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Tell us, dude. Tell us.
So, Jürgen Obendorf, that is Eric's dad's name, is wondering if somebody else should do this nefarious task, whatever it is, since the police already suspect him. But basically, Alexander is like, this is not a suggestion, it's an order, and I need you to do this immediately. There's no question that you can ask right now. So.
He's a pushover. Obendorf is a real pushover here. It looks like they have some definite roles that Alexander is absolutely in charge and Obendorf is absolutely his underling. Mm-hmm. No question.
Yeah. Now, at some point in here, and I told Steve before, listeners, let you know that some of the scenes, we're not going through point by point, we're sort of breaking things up. But at another point in this episode, so I went ahead and put it in here, another person comes out of the Winding Caves. So that makes me wonder if it's the same person and we're seeing it again, or if it's another stranger that has shown up in the town. So that was kind of interesting. And I hadn't, it's been a while since I watched this episode, but we had a person come out of the caves. And in the second one, we had a person coming out of the caves, but we did not get a look at this person's face. So we have no idea who it was.
Yeah, like you said, it could be a separate moment in time, and it could be the same dude with the suitcase. Ike Larson. Let's just go ahead and say his name, Ike Larson. I thought that it was not the same person. I thought that because he went to his hotel room and he was like getting clean and stuff, and meanwhile that was going on, this other hooded person that looked exactly like him.
Yep.
Was creeping around and dragging stuff around, but I got the distinct impression it was not that hotel dude, not Ike Larson.
I feel the same way.
I should say the stranger. I'm sorry. The stranger is what we're supposed to call him.
Yeah. What we're supposed to get out of this, I guess, would either number one, there's creepy people in the caves. So, like, the caves is where the creepy people hang out. And second, that there's nefarious people around. There's different people coming out of these caves, and there's kind of spreads out the suspicion again.
Yeah.
So back at the Wyndon Hotel, Regina Tiedemann is surprised to see a customer show up, and the customer is the first stranger we saw who picked up the dead bird, and he wants a room, and she's very like, okay, can I help you? He's like, I'd like a room. She's like, this hasn't happened in weeks. Yeah.
I forgot how to do this. What's my job again?
Yeah.
I mean, she should be psyched, but I mean, he's not like exactly the ideal hotel, patron here. He's pretty dirty and pretty hooded. You don't enter a room with a hood on. Yeah. I wouldn't think. I'm just saying, stranger, don't do that.
So his room number is 8.
Yes.
And we both thought this was interesting, that it can be the infinity symbol on a vertical axis. Mm-hmm. But also I think it's interesting because there was all the deal with the room numbers in 1899, right?
Exactly.
Room numbers always seem to have the significance.
I was taking the infinity route there. That's exactly what I was thinking, is it reminded me of the infinity symbol that either we saw earlier. No, I think maybe my second time watching it is when I made that connection, actually. I've watched this 3 times this week. I went for an extra third because I liked it that much.
So after he's booked this room, he's taking a shower, getting cleaned off, and and he has pinned objects all over the room. Looks an awful lot like our murder board at the beginning, Steve.
I think I know whose murder board that is now.
He exits the bathroom, and we can see his back is covered with scars as well. And he has this book called A Journey Through Time by H.G. Tannhaus. He has a small key that opens that suitcase he's been carrying, and we see this machine with gears inside. Nice. And this is the cool find I had this week, Steve. This board he has many interesting things on it. Okay. There's charts and looks like swirls, just swirls and scientific looking things. Yeah. Yeah. He doesn't really strike you that he could be a mad scientist, but okay. But the very last picture had a picture of 2 concentric circles, and the caption read, or the symbol next to the picture said, "Vom Ort der Welt." So I had to look up that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, can you translate that for us, please?
Well, I put it into a translator, and it says, "From anywhere in the world."
from anywhere in the world.
Is what I got out of that. May not be an exact translation because it came out sort of anywhere in the world, but in another, there was Google entries and there was also the translator. But I think it's a cool that why is he, your mind is automatically like, why would he be researching this stuff? Is this is what he's carrying around with him, is all these charts, but he seems to be a scientist of some kind. But I feel like that's an important thing to point out, that he has that specific picture.
Yeah, sure. And it says from anywhere in the world. So that makes me think about infinity again, because you have ultimate, unlimited possibilities. So I'll just stop there, because that's as far as my my verbal process will take me with this new information. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking, is like open possibilities.
So Jonas goes upstairs to his father's studio.
Yeah.
And this was kind of a sad scene, but it's also so relatable, as after somebody dies, you kind of want to be in that, you want to feel like close to them, so you will find a way to share space. And people do this sometimes by putting on people's clothes or hanging out in their bedroom. So this must be the room that Jonas associates most with his father, right?
Yeah, his studio, yeah.
This is probably where he spent the most time and maybe felt the happiest, or felt himself. It was kind of his private space. So we see many paintings on the wall, and some of them look pretty disturbing. There's one wall that's just basically covered in black slashes. It looks like... Did you get a good look at any of this artwork, Steve?
No, I didn't get a good look at any of it, but I did get a sense, that his dad had a kind of a darker mind, was a complicated person, probably a person who lived internally and was thoughtful, I would think. But yeah, that's somebody that definitely had like a darker edge to them. But
these paintings were, some of them could be called nightmarish.
Yeah, absolutely, sure. I'm watching Yellow Jackets, and there's like little pictures that one of the characters draws, and it's very similar. Very dark, scary stuff that you wouldn't expect from a small child. You would expect this from an older painter, I suppose, and it's telling that that's what he fixates on painting. He's not trying to paint like beautiful things. He's trying to paint the darkness. Right.
Yeah, it kind of, the closest thing I relate it to is when somebody's, like a child is often being abused, they do art therapy, right?
Sure,
and
yes.
They will allow them to draw their feelings, and a lot of times the pictures the children will make will be really disturbing. This is a grown man, but these are the things, this is his outlet in one way or another. This is how he can express himself. For good or bad, who are we to judge? But it's just, it does give us a little picture into his mind, like you said.
Yep.
And Jonas at one point kind of just lies down to rest or meditate. And because he's in that different angle, he notices this loose board in the ceiling.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a hiding spot. And inside of this spot, there's this very elaborate map of the Winden Caves. Now, I can't remember how I knew it was the caves, but it's just this big...
Yeah.
It says, I guess it says Winden Caves. Okay.
And Netflix gave us a little translation at the bottom of the screen in case we missed it, too.
Yes.
What a score of a find, man. That's an awesome thing to find right there.
Yeah. It allows... I don't know. It allows him to has Jonas to have something to focus on, figuring this out, this mystery.
Yeah, and like a map of underground caverns. Like what if you're having troubles and you can't get your mind off certain things? That's something that will definitely take your mind off of it. Is just looking at a map and looking at the inscriptions. Interesting inscriptions. One of the inscriptions says something like the crossings, or where is the crossing, or something along those lines.
That's right.
And that of course probably made Jonas wonder what the heck that was, because he focused on that saying too.
Right.
Great score, man. Good job, Jonas.
Jana Nelson visits the tomb of her son, Mads, and she places this figurine. She replaces one figurine with another. And I couldn't figure out exactly who this character was, but for some reason I thought it was He-Man. It was a He-Man character.
Looks like a He-Man knockoff, I would say. Yeah, German version of He-Man.
Okay. She kind of swaps them out, almost like you would swap out flowers, instead of like, I think it's cute. Have this, yeah, it is. And the grave reads Mads Nielsen, 4/12/1973 to infinity.
Hey, this episode comes out on 4/12/2023. Everything is connected. I
guess you've set yourself a deadline. All right, everybody. So it's going to be out tomorrow.
Whoops! Edit that. But yeah, what you're saying about the infinity marker, you're right. That's a pretty badass way to like make an inscription for somebody that you're not sure what their what the day they deceased was, or even if they are deceased, right?
Yeah. I mean, I thought this was interesting. I'm like, is this a thing people do? Is this a common practice? Or
no.
For this particular grave, it would indicate that, like you said, either they don't know. The body was never found. They have no date. So yeah, it did make me wonder if other people do this, or if this was like this family, that was the decision they made, that they were going to not put a date down.
Yeah, I've never seen that before. And I guess this is a good place to say, too, that something that I noticed was how this ties in like with the theme song of the show, which like says the phrase, neither ever nor never goodbye. And that's what's happening here is Mad's mom is like at the grave supposedly saying goodbye to Mads, but she's never got a chance to actually say goodbye to him. Therefore, she is always going to that grave, swapping out those figures, and she's pretty much always saying goodbye to him. I thought that was a really neat scene.
So good. It was such a good find, Steve. I was like, oh, really like, I don't know, gut punch there, Steve, to find that. But yeah, I loved that. That this was a really, I don't know, it was a really sweet moment having her go there and do that, and maybe she's done it before. It's a ritual she does to stay close to him, and yeah.
It seemed like she had a whole box full of those knockoff figures. So I think she does this probably on a weekly, monthly, annual basis. I don't know. But it seems like this is a regular thing she does.
Mm-hmm. So the Nielsen family, they show this family going through this period of grief, and everybody's expressing things their own way. So Katerina, she's just on watch. She's confident that Mikkel's still going to come home, but she will stand out in the rain like a guard dog waiting for him to come home, and for her other kids. She's intense. She's an intense character.
This just happened to her, so heck yeah.
Yeah. And then Marta is just blocking all the phone calls. Magnus is punching his walls until his knuckles are bloody.
Yep.
And Ulrich is he's frantically searching on his own.
Right.
And he could be working with somebody, like working with Charlotte, or even talking to his wife. But instead, this family is not we saw them in episode 1, and we both enjoyed their family scene and thought it seemed like so comforting kind of and familiar. But this family, as many families do, instead of taking comfort in each other and coming closer together, everybody's just kind of 3 shades to the wind trying to handle it by themselves.
Well, something I took differently was when she was standing out in the rain, like you said, waiting for Mikkel, and then Magnus comes home and they kind of share a look, and then Magnus is looking kind of upset, obviously, and then goes upstairs and is punching his wall. I think that was like almost. I think that was a very telling look between the two of them. Like, he feels guilty because he was the one that was supposed to be watching Mikkel. He brought Mikkel with them that night, so he's probably feeling very responsible. I know this because the song they're playing is by a band called called Myra K. A song called Industry here, and what the song is about is feeling overwhelming guilt. And so I think that song choice probably is geared towards Magnus, and his mom is looking at him. She loves Magnus, but she might be thinking that at this moment, like, you know, you took Mikkel out of here and now he's gone because of you. I don't know. That's kind of what I took from that. Right.
But I feel like the healthier thing would have been to do is for Magnus to go to his mom and for them to hug, you know, like you said, like if even what you said, they shared a look, but then they kind of went their own ways. And if she is thinking, that's kind of what happens too. Like, your mental state divides you from the people you should be loving and keeping close to you. And instead you sort of push everybody away because you feel guilty or you feel sad or feel bad, and you're like ashamed of those feelings. So you're just trying to handle it on your own. And I feel like that's what everybody's trying to do. It's very normal, very natural, but it still was, you know, it's not a very functional way to act as a family. Ideally, you want to come together and help each other. But this is what happens. Like, a lot of times you see if somebody's kid goes missing, sometimes a marriage cannot survive that. You know, you end up, or if the child dies, even, you see families fall apart because they need. It's hard to come together, but it's grueling here. But you know, one of the things that I didn't mention though is Ulrich is also ignoring Hannah's calls.
Yeah.
And she finally comes to the police station and is sort of trying to do the "I'm here for you," Ulrich, and he has to kind of put her in her place.
Yeah, he does.
Says he can't do this right now, and I don't know. So, what do you think about this Nielsen family and this Ulrich with Hannah? That was, I don't know. You felt a little bad for Hannah, but at the same time, you were kind of happy that he's trying, you know, for once he's trying to be a good dad and focus on his duties.
Yeah, I you know, point one for Ulrich, because not really point one, just I understand. Point 0 for Ulrich here. He doesn't get a point taken away because he's too torn up right now to try and to even think about kissing or anything. So of course he's not into that right now. And that's he and Hannah's entire relationship is the gist that I got. It's a sexual only relationship. Right now he doesn't want sex. Therefore, right now he doesn't want Hannah. And Hannah gets something out of their relationship too. You know, she's, you know, missing comfort. Her husband committed suicide. So she's getting, even though she's not getting what she wants out of this relationship, she's getting something. She's getting some comfort. And she looks pretty mad at the end here that Ulrich doesn't want her. She looks kind of like unjustifiably pissed. And that was -1 for Hannah in my mind there. You know, because, I mean, people feel the way they're going to feel, and they're not going to act the way that they should act. But this whole moment, I mean, I think the most appropriate thing for Hannah to do in this situation would be to go to the household of the family and be like, I'm here for all of you guys. You know, I'm sorry this happened because this is her son's friend. Her son is involved. She's got to put this affair past her and at least for the next couple of weeks, play it cool. She can't expect Ulrich to want to play hanky-panky right now. And I don't blame him. Nobody's blaming him for not wanting to do this because he's doing what he should be. I mean, he's not doing what he should be doing. He's grieving by himself, like the whole family is. And that is something we should acknowledge about the Nielsen family, is that we saw Martha and the mom having a moment earlier. They had maybe a 10-minute moment, but they've all been suffering silently alone. And that's how Ulrich likes it. He doesn't need somebody else to talk to right now. Certainly not Hannah. We see him go to his wife later and talk to her a little bit. That's a +1 Ulrich.
Yeah, I didn't mean it so much not so much that I felt bad for Hannah, but I guess I related to Hannah because I felt like in the last episode, he was kind of chasing her hard and heavy. Yeah. And then when that person just disappears, even if you do know, like, this isn't appropriate at all, and it's not really appropriate, he just sort of disappeared. Of course, he's doing the same thing with the rest of his family, right? He's, like, not talking to Katarina either. So you can't expect he would be talking to Hannah. But when you feel a closeness to someone, even if it's a fake closeness, which, like you said, their relationship is mainly sexual. That's what we see, at least. Sure. When that kind of just leaves, it can be hurtful to have that person just ghost you out of the blue. But it is not appropriate at all for her to show up at his work and be like, hey, you haven't called me back. Well, guess what? I don't call my wife and I don't call my mother either. So why am I going to call you?
Fair point.
So we see Eric again strapped into that chair, and we don't even see at this point Eric's eyes. So who knows what those look like. This is the last we see of Eric as a living being, is this scene here. Next time we see Eric, his body is being dragged in a bag by a man in a raincoat. Yeah, and his eyes are all burned up, too. We see that red hair. We see his burn up eyes. Yeah. And, you can't tell if it's our stranger in the hotel or if it's the pseudo-stranger that we saw later. But some hooded figure is dragging a burned up Eric. His body is looking lifeless too. And when the torture is actually going on, there's a TV program with a man doing a little lesson about science, almost like Bill Nye the Science Guy. There's this little wizened man giving a lecture on TV, and that is what is being watched by whoever has strapped Eric into this chair. So it seemed appropriate to the scene, more fun too. Things about that room. It's an educational room on top of that. But he was saying something like about how far we go for science and the boundaries that we push for science, and we're seeing that as this is happening. So it makes me think those two things might be connected. Everything is connected, right? Right. So Marta is ignoring Bartosz's calls. So he's like, hey, I don't have anything else to do. Let me look in that bag of dope that I got from the cave. He should have been thinking up a long time ago. And he finds a cell phone. Score, yes. And it's the deal where the screen is like, hey, you've got 3 tries to get this password. He tries one and it doesn't work. So he kind of gives up from there. But it was kind of interesting that Bartosz has found this mysterious cell phone, right? I hope he tries. I don't know. I was thinking he should go ahead and give it another shot, buddy. Try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Try 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Come on. Try A.
Ah, there you go. Try your birthday, Bartosz. What's your birthday, buddy? Put that in there. I mean,
or Eric's birth date.
Oh.
You know, something else.
Because it was Eric's stash. Yeah, that's right.
It's supposedly Eric's stash. Yeah.
Or Eric's dad's stash. Maybe it's makes me think it's Eric's phone and like I don't know.
Yeah.
Speculation only. I don't remember whose phone this is. I was hoping it would ring at one point. Maybe we'll see it ring later.
Ooh, maybe.
Keep it charged up anyway, Bartosz.
Is there a charger in the bag?
I didn't see one, but hopefully it has a universal.
Universal charger. Go to Walmart. So Ulrich is looking at the tire tread patterns that Charlotte has already. This again would be a perfect opportunity for him to talk to Charlotte because hey, she's the tire tread expert.
Right.
So he realizes they come from a van, which I think this was brought up in the first episode, right? That Mr. Opendorf has a van.
Yeah.
That was, and I remember you going, maybe that'll come up later. Who knows?
It was real quick. Next episode, here we go.
So all of a sudden, Ulrich is a good detective, and he's like, Mr. Opendorf has a van, which is what Charlotte said in the first episode. Okay. So he asks his coworker if they questioned Jürgen, and it turns out he was working at the power plant the night Mikkel disappeared. And he just decides to search Jürgen Oberdorf's property. And I did not mean to say Urbendorf. But he's going to search his property. And this was a really creepy scene, really well done, where he's searching through all this stuff and finding all these creepy objects and jars. And
I had a question about the jar. What was in that jar? We couldn't tell, could we?
I think it was coins, just like random coins.
It didn't sound like coins, though. It sounded weird. He
looked at several jars. But the last one he held up, he's like, "What is this?" He was just looking at all these creepy objects, and he finds a dirty mattress, which is pretty suspicious.
Really suspicious.
Yeah, and underneath the mattress is a hatch. I feel like I'm telling a creepy story, like a creepy campfire story.
He slowly opened the hatch door.
Yeah, and then Jürgen tries to stop him from going further with this search with a shotgun in his hand. I feel like he had a rifle or something. He's like,
that's appropriate.
Don't open
I think
this.
That's appropriate if somebody's going through your stuff and you don't know who they are.
Yeah, but there's this bag attached by chains to the floor. So he's.
What is up with that thing?
Yeah. So, you're sort of, when I first watched this episode, I'm like, what is in the bag? Is it
head?
Mikkel's head?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
I think that they want us to think that. And instead it's just plastic baggies of drugs.
Yeah, just more dope. Just more dope.
Why would you...
That he kept in mud? Down in the ground?
That's the strangest hiding system I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And he does the stupidest confession I've ever heard in my life, too. Like, he's like, oh, yeah, those are... He could have just been like, yeah, those are drugs, okay. But no, those are me and Eric's drugs. Me and Eric sold drugs at his school to school children, Ulrich. That was like the dumbest... But Ulrich didn't even... He's so far gone, he didn't even... That passed right by him. He should have been putting handcuffs on him and been like, you're selling drugs to school children. Let's go have a chat, buddy. But he just blazed past that.
Yeah, Ulrich's not doing, we've already established he's not doing well, and he's sort of not focusing on his job. But it was a very heartbreaking scene with Mr. Obendorf. He's, maybe it wasn't the smartest thing to confess to selling drugs to kids at school. But he's just like, Eric and I were selling drugs so Eric could buy a scooter. And it's so sad. You're like, he was trying to help his son. I guess this family is really poor, maybe a lot poorer than we realized. And so he loves his son and wanted him to have his scooter. So he's like, sure, I'll help you sell drugs, buddy. I mean,
I think that might have been Eric's room. Maybe. I mean, why else would that mattress be there? I mean, that dude, Obendorf, lived in that trailer. So, I mean, I guess it makes sense that Eric lived in that trailer too, and these are just like their garages, but...
Oh, surely not. Surely not. Surely he does not have his son, you know, I think this is just their workshop. You know, you're not...
And what, you take a break and lay down on the mattress when you're tired from all your welding, James?
Well, it could be that I don't know. Eric has disappeared sometimes for a couple days for one reason or another.
That's right.
So maybe they leave the mattress in case Eric comes home,
okay.
Or maybe he's hiding out so they don't catch him selling drugs. I don't know. Like, you know, he had to.
That is tied in with Alexander Tiedemann, obviously. But I get the sense that his dad is sweet and innocent. At this point, anyway. I mean, I know the laws of misdirect with television shows, okay? I understand how that works. But right now, like, he's not my suspect. He looks very sincere. Yeah. He looked like he, you know, cared for his son despite the fact that they were a drug-dealing duo.
Yeah. And if he's so broken up about his son, then why would he want to hurt somebody else's son? You know?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But speaking of Alexander Tiedemann...
Oh, is he coming up?
Yeah, he's monitoring some items, whatever the them was that we're getting rid of. Some items being loaded into a large tractor trailer.
I hate it when the president watches me drive a forklift around. It makes me very nervous because that does happen sometimes at my job.
But yeah, this is like... This is another thing. The search warrant is looming, perhaps. So he needs to get rid of whatever this thing is before the search warrant happens.
That makes total sense. Have we already had the scene where Ulrich was, you know, begging with him through the gates to let him in for the search warrant? I think that's a scene that happened already, right?
I don't think I didn't necessarily cover it in the recap, so we can discuss it if you want.
Oh, not much to discuss. Just the fact that what you said, that seems exactly why they're getting rid of this stuff, because they know a search warrant is looming and that Ulrich is coming for you, buddy.
Yeah. He's just like, let me in so I can search now. Why wait for the search warrant? And Alexander is like, sorry, Ulrich, we can't because of security issues. But yeah. That scene is, Ulrich is standing there in the rain, and just he looks sad. Lots of sadness in this episode.
Yep.
But Katerina comes home, and where she's been home. Anyway, everybody's home, and Ulrich finds her in Mikkel's bedroom, and she just kind of says, no matter what, you won't keep secrets from me. And this was a powerful scene. I have no idea exactly what she's referring to when she said that. We already saw her discover the hair. Right. But
that's where my mind went, that she was, concerned about that. Mm-hmm. Another thing, too, that happened that I didn't see in your recap was we had Jonas talking with his mom as well. Mm-hmm. They were hanging out in the kitchen, sitting on the counter. That's how me and Charlotte talk. We sit on the counters in the kitchen exactly like that. That's where we have our chats. And they're talking, and it seems like Hannah and Jonah's dad, Michael, didn't have like the tightest relationship, and a lot of things she didn't know about him. The most significant thing, though, was Jonas said, "Did you love him?" She never answers that question. much in the same way that when she told Ulrich that she loved him, Ulrich left her hanging. So she just left Jonas hanging here. The disruption here was the lights came on, so she was distracted, but it's significant that she never answered that question.
Right. I'm not sure if there's two questions, but one of the questions that he asked his mom, he may have asked her, do you love him? But I feel like the question I remember is he said, do you miss him? And she says, I miss the idea of him.
Yeah. I thought that was a harsh lesson in love there.
But they're kind of sharing a moment too, like you said. Like we talked about sharing moments. They're sort of sharing a moment like Katerina and Marcia shared a moment. But the lights in the town are flickering in different buildings. So you mentioned the house already, at the Nielsen house, at the school, at the hotel, and the police station. And Charlotte leaves the police station and finds the sidewalk covered in dead birds.
I think that the stranger would have a field day over there. He would be loving it. All these dead birds he could pick up. I'm thinking these are signs that the power plant is not exactly what we would like it to be, because we got the sweatshirt saying nuclear power, no thanks. We got dead birds, maybe because of toxic smoke, and we got the lights flickering across town. The power plant is not supposed to have flickery lights, so obviously that's also related to the power plant too. So it seems to me power plant, oh yeah, and the power plant is clearing some crap out now because they're getting ready to get searched. Big question marks hanging over that plant.
Yeah, I did wonder if the lights flickering caused the dead birds, or if it was there's some other grander thing that caused both the flickering lights and the dead birds. Like those two things are obviously related. And what would cause birds to just fall out of the sky, all of a sudden at the same time?
Well, in Yellow Jackets this week, when Shauna pricked her finger and blood fell onto the symbol of the blanket, that's when all the dead birds fell from the sky onto their roof. And I think that was maybe more symbolic of the of Lottie's crew out there and what they're up to in the woods in Yellow Jackets. But anyway, let's get back to Dark.
Steve,
it's just funny, the same thing.
Don't get your yellow jackets and your yellow jackets, your yellow rain jackets confused.
They are totally connected because I watched 2 shows this week with like dead birds plopping from the skies. So that says something.
You got your next meme, I think, to work on.
Hey.
So the stranger puts a new clipping up on his wall. And the headline used to say, "Where is Mikkel?" He crosses out the word "where" and replaces it with "when." When is Mikkel? Now, what does that remind you of, Steve?
I would say 1899 one more time. Is that what you're getting at, or no?
No.
Well, it made me...
I was thinking of Mikkel's magic trick.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right.
Remember with the cups?
Not where did it go, but when did it go?
That question is how, because the question there was how. And he says the question is not how, it's when.
Yes.
And so the stranger changes the question here from where to when.
I did not catch that at all. We all caught it now, though. Thank you. That's great.
Yes. Catch it now, people, because this is the coolness of the show. If you did not catch that, so many awesome things that they do with this story, because each episode builds on another, and the points that you didn't think you thought were, oh, that's interesting, just become more and more interesting, like Steve pointed out with the lyrics, too. But this was... this is a mind-blowing moment here. This where is Mikkel changed to when is Mikkel.
Right.
And knowing that Mikkel loves magic tricks, is Mikkel doing a magic trick, here?
Yeah. even unknowingly to himself, because it doesn't look like he's got his magician confidence on his face right now. When we see the next scene.
Yeah. So, as if in answer, we finally see Mikkel climbing out of the caves.
Yay! I was happy.
And we're like, yeah, we're like happy. We're like, good. This kid, we love him. We already love him, right?
Yep.
We want him to be okay. So he comes out of the caves. His face is dirty. He's not looking good. He runs home and his key doesn't work. And a teenager comes out of the house, and Mikkel is really confused and exchange names, and the teenager says that his name is Ulrich.
He says he's Ulrich, and I think he says that the kid is dense, and it's definitely his house, and it's definitely Ulrich, except it looks like a little young, handsome punk here.
Yeah. Young guy, maybe about the same age as Jonas and Bartosz.
We've already got time traveled introduced into the show. We've got a young Ulrich here at his house. I'm sure if we went inside the house, we would see his mom and dad from earlier, maybe looking younger. And who comes and picks him up that morning? Mm-hmm. Who's he going to school with? That's his lady friend, Katerina, right?
Ooh, Katerina. And this is our first peek at the casting. The casting here. I mean, I don't know if I think the resemblance as strongly with the Ulrich characters, but that teenage Katerina, they sure did a good job picking her. The resemblance is uncanny, especially the eyes. But yeah, there's so we have Ulrich and we have Katerina picking him up, and that is Mikkel's parents, and of course Mikkel is really confused about this whole scenario, as we all would be, right?
He recognizes that he knows the names and he knows who they are. Mm-hmm. So he's like super confused, and of course he pulls up that newspaper and it shows us and him that it's 1986 now. Mm-hmm. So that's a big slap to the face for Mikkel there. Oh, speaking of slap to the face, when they go off to school together and she's like, who's that? And, he makes some snide remark. She smacks him upside his head, just like Magnus likes to smack his little brother Mikkel upside the head. So I think I take it back, all that stuff about Magnus being a bully to his brother, because obviously that's like a Nielsen family, like tradition, like thing that they do to each other.
She hit him on the head?
She smacked him on the back of the head exactly like Magnus and Bartosz did to Mikkel. Exactly.
That's really cool.
I thought it was
especially
too.
Since it's Katerina who's the one who's doing it.
Oh yeah, and the yellow chair that we saw back in 2019 that the drugs were in was not there when Mikkel came out. So I think that's maybe like one of our signposts we can look out for in the future, is that yellow chair, whether it's there or not. Yeah,
the yellow chair. So this is crazy, right? We didn't necessarily expect time travel. Before, when you first come into the show, right? This was a watch-alike to Stranger Things. So we expected there to be murder, kidnapping, missing kids, foul play. But I don't think anybody, when this show came out, expected it to be time travel.
Nope, not even remotely. Yep, I'll notice that Ulrich's dad snuck out again. We can't forget that. We see him sneaking out one more time. What's Ulrich's dad's name again? I keep calling him Ulrich's dad.
Trant.
Trant has sneaking out once again. Somebody should give him a head smack.
They're in bed, and we see, we're seeing the patterns of the family emerging. But that is the end of this episode. What do you think overall about this episode, Steve?
Oh, wow. I thought it was great because a lot of the characters that didn't have conflict before now have conflict. We had some freewheeling characters like Bartosz and even like Magnus before that, all Magnus was worried about was his hoodie. Now he's got a lot of stuff going on. Same with Bartosz. He's dealing with this as well in his own way. Everybody has conflict right now. So it's great they added more conflict, more murder mysteries, the time travel. This is the kind of thing they would usually end a series on. This seems like it's like the last episode of a whole season or something. So that this is episode 2 is very inspiring that more good stuff is following. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask you, we're going to talk about who we liked in this episode and who we didn't like. We always got to name one person in each category. Can you tell me one person that you liked and one person that you didn't like? And I'll write it down for the archives.
Well, my MVP of this episode is still continuing with Magnus. I thought he gave a really strong performance with his scene at the tree and also the scene punching the wall. He did a really good job bringing that raw energy to... Why are you laughing at me?
Because his hands got all bloody. He was like, you said he did a good job, and I was thinking like his hands were tore up.
With that performance
absolutely.
Of giving raw energy with, he doesn't really have any speaking parts at all, but his face is tortured. He did a great job. As far as who I didn't like...
There's a bunch of possibilities.
Can you say who you liked first, and give me time to think about who I didn't like?
Sure. This was a tough one for me because there wasn't like really any standouts here. I was thinking maybe Francesca, but I think the autopsy director at the beginning of the episode is my favorite person so far because she taught us about the ear things. She seemed like she was really into like science and her job, and she was cute. I thought she was cute. And I hope anytime a dead body comes up on the show that she's the one that gets to examine it. So that autopsy doctor is my MVP of the episode.
I think I'm going to have to go for worst. I think I'm going to have to go with Trant.
Okay,
Nielsen.
Solid.
Making up, not only is he lying to his wife, but he's making up really terrible lies that aren't convincing at all.
Yeah, not even trying.
Yeah, there's not much to really like about him. We see him covering up bloody sleeves and sneaking out twice. And he's not, you can tell that his son's in pain, his son's family's in pain. Yana's in pain. And it just seems like he's very self-absorbed and not the type to offer comfort at all.
Absolutely. Yep. I was thinking he might be my least favorite too, but I went with Alexander Tiedemann. Is that how you say his last name? Tiedemann. Yeah, because he seems like a real big know-it-all prick that like lords his power over everybody else. He wasn't very likable in this episode at all, so he's my number one least favorite MVP.
So you think maybe he's so stressed out and needs those back massages because of all the cruelty that he exacts upon people? All that negative energy?
That thing in his back might be all these like nerves like all bunched up in this big thing because he has all this guilt and just anger inside of him. I don't know. But yeah, I didn't mind him the first episode, but this episode, he's no good.
So if you could come up with, I don't know, I guess before we exito, I wanted to ask, like, what's your big question at the end of this episode? Like, what's the thing you most want to know?
How exactly Mikkel got to 1986. Absolutely. Another big question, who is that dead guy? Is it Mads? Like Heather so desperately wants to think it's Mads. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. But who is he if he's not that? I'm centered on the dead children. I think you're supposed to be, right? Something is killing the children, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
I mean, I know you don't have questions at this point because you're more familiar with the series than me. I'm Mr. Forgetful. I mean, that's why I'm doing this because I want to stick it in my brain. can you play pretend as if you've never seen anything else? And what would your biggest questions be at this point if you've never seen it before?
Well, I think I want to know what's Peter Doppler's secret.
Oh, big one.
Is one of the things. And, what did Alexander want to get rid of? And
okay, yes.
Yeah, where does the door lead? What's the code to the cell phone? I mean, there's so many questions.
Yeah, who's the stranger? What's up with the cave map? Yeah.
Exactly. There's so much. But yeah, the big question is, I think, the overall question you have is about Mikkel and how did he get there, and can it be undone? How can he undo this? Because this must be very painful for him coming home and finding, right, if he can even wrap his head around, my parents are teenagers and there's no room for me, at this house right now. So I am a homeless person. Right.
A man without a country.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that when I read a lot of books when I was a kid, like even before I was a teenager, I was, reading adult books and all kinds of fantasies going through my head. And I'd read Stephen King's The Stand when it was released, and I was maybe 10 or 11. So like I had all these big things going through my head too. Like, what if, I went back in time? What if I like woke up tomorrow and I was my dad? What if? Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if Mikkel plays with those things in his head a lot. But a lot of times when you fantasize about these kind of things, you tend to go on the more fun side of it. Like, ooh, if I went back in time, I would say this to that person, or I would do this. Mikkel right now is just stuck in the tragedy of it, but I hope he gets to have some fun with this. I hope he gets to like tease his dad, or maybe smack his mom upside the head or something, here's your chance, Mikkel. It seems like a lot of fun could be had.
Or could he go to a place where he can smack baby Magnus up the head, Or yeah, what's
the kind of place that like never changes with time? Like that's something I would think about too. Like if I went back in time, I could go to downtown Richmond and it would be very similar to what I know now because of the cobblestone streets and the old architecture. So like, I wonder what kind of familiar stuff around Winden is still familiar to Mikkel. Mm-hmm. That he might be able to immerse himself. Maybe the library is similar, or if they have like a YMCA type thing that he can take refuge in or something. He's got to go somewhere. He's got to sleep somewhere. I hope he doesn't sleep on the streets. I guess it'll be yet to see on next episode, which I might watch right now. Since we're free of episode 2 now, it might be time to go into episode 3.
Right on.
All right. Well, let's do some plug time, Lindsay. I'm going to plug you. One of my stories. You got a lot of stuff going on over there. You did the South by Southwest thing. Please remind everybody of the interview you did with the director of Coherence.
Yeah. So I got to interview James Ward Burkett, the director of Coherence, which I guess Steve just watched recently too.
I did.
Yeah. And he has a new mini-series coming out called Shatterbelt, which debuted at South by Southwest. So I got to interview him about that series. And he's a very interesting guest to have on the podcast. So
I think that might have been one of the best interviews I've heard with you. He was really open to all your questions and he like tackled them. He wasn't, I definitely got the sense that he wasn't just, going through the motions or whatever. He wasn't just on the phone. He was like, he was engaged. It was great.
Yeah. So that's on one of my stories. That's my latest post. So yeah, I'll plug that. And thank you very much for that plug.
Yep. Do you have any other plugs, or is it Steve Barnes plug time?
Steve Barnes. Well, we've got Introvoid, of course, who runs the Sweet Child Time podcast. And he's always putting out music that you can listen to. And you can find his link tree in the show notes.
It's always there every week. And I recently covered Goodbye by Apparat. I called it Apparat's Goodbye because I wanted to make sure the band got their name in there somewhere in the title. Yep. But my most thing I do is this, Sweet Child of Time. This is like what I've been focusing on mostly. I've noticed a big uptick in the 1899 recaps lately. I think maybe because we're doing Dark, maybe some of our same listeners are going back and listening to the 1899 recaps I did with Nate and with you occasionally. So yeah, I welcome people to check that out.
Yeah, and I mean, if you like that, a lot of things with time travel, Steve has talked about several things. I need to go back and listen to more of your archive to get to know your material, but Wheel of Time 1899 is covered and recovered. So they covered it a second time. But you also did stuff like Time Bandits and other shows like that, right?
Yeah, I did Time Bandits. I did I did other things too that I can't remember off the top of my head. In the future, I'll probably I'll continue doing Dark, continue doing Wheel of Time, and probably lean into stuff like Severance, Yellow Jackets, maybe Swarm, whatever else catches my fancy. It's all up to me. I love to recap TV shows, and that's what I'm going to continue to do.
I'm a fan. That's why I slid into your DMs to be like, let's talk about 1899. Because I liked the show so much. So I do encourage you to check it out.
Thank you very much. I think we're winding down now, Lindsay. So I think it's about time that I suggest that you, down there in the South you are, to find some water and shade this spring.
Steve, I hope you find water and shade and a yellow chair.
A yellow chair to go with my yellow rain jacket and my yellow jacket coverage. And to all the fans and all the listeners out there, thank you very much. Goodbye. Find water and shade. Until next week. Sweet Child of Time. Bye, Lindsay.
Bye.